Okay, so our first presenter, I think everybody here probably got the write-up we made on the company. Researchify is well, I'll let Rob tell you what it is, and like I said, you've probably seen the write-up, at least you have it. If you don't, it's on the website. There's actually some copies of it, a few copies of it out on the table, but I think what's really apparent, I think what Rob will help drive the point home, is that the clinical trial industry is broken, and it's going to get worse. And unfortunately, if the clinical trial doesn't get started, the industry doesn't get better, all these drugs we're hoping are going to save humanity, they're not going to save anybody because they're not going to get researched. And it's becoming acute, and it's becoming acute for a variety of reasons. And I think at least one of those, and I think maybe as we move down the line, maybe a few of those problems are things that Rob's trying to solve. But initially, I think I will just say one thing, and I think I put it in the write-up. He's got 52 customers right now, right? Clients. More than that, and 27 of them are investors in this first round. I don't know if I've ever seen that happen. So, at any rate, only private company we have today, it's outside of Justin's fund. I guess that's private. But great story. Guy with deep knowledge of the industry, and I think he's doing something that could be really transformational. So,
fantastic. Good morning. Thank you, everybody. My name is Rob Bohawks. I'm the founder and CEO of Researchify Health, and I'm slightly looking in the sun, so I'm heavily squinting toward the people in the audience. I apologize about that. Before I get started today, I just want to say thank you to Dave. Did a tremendous job just diving into the problem and really understanding the challenges that exist in the clinical trials. And I think he was a little bit surprised after he did the diligence of one side. We have amazing drug discovery today, next generation medicines, but then there is this horrible process in the way you run clinical trials, particularly at research sites. And I've spent the last 20 years in the clinical trial space, and I look back at what I have accomplished as an individual, and also seeing what has changed significantly in that time process. And unfortunately, in 20 years, I'd say that the management of clinical trials at a major research site or an independent research site or even a private practice that's conducting clinical trials has unfortunately gotten worse, right? Clinical trials have become far more complex to manage. The type of patients we're trying to put into the clinical trial is becoming far more precise, so we can have a better outcome of that particular drug in that clinical trial. There are probably fewer people in the clinical trial space from human capital than there were even pre-pandemic because of the significant burnout. And yet here we are with this very exciting wave of next generation medicines and AI-led drug discovery as well. So unfortunately, while we may not think that clinical trials applies to a lot of folks in this room, I would beg to differ for two reasons. One, there's a lot of significant medical conditions today. Will be a broad range of cancer subtypes, dementia, Alzheimer's, ALS, significant diseases that have no effective treatments today, or very limited effective treatments, unfortunately. So it impacts all of us and all of our families. And I think there's some biotech investors in this room as well, what I've seen from previous conferences here with Dave, who understand that it takes a lot of money to get a clinical trial completed from those investments. And kind of speaking about that, it's important to think that a clinical trial, a single clinical trial, ranges between $5 million to $300 million for a pharmaceutical company. It takes over $1 billion to get a single drug to market today, so it's very, very expensive. The cost per day is very expensive, but anytime you delay a clinical trial because of enrollment or site performance or other issues, right, it means that you can't get that drug to market while somebody else may or can, unfortunately. And again, looking at my last 20 years, like what has been the challenge, right? There's lots of software available in the clinical trial space, nothing that great. But what has been the challenge? And the challenge is that you have significant resource constraints at a site. And what we have learned, even in the last 2 years in our own company, and what we see is a bit eye-opening even for us veterans as well. And just to give some context, there's 86,000 ongoing clinical trials in the world today, kind of talking about specific sub-diseases specifically. 8,000 clinical trials in cancer. Probably about 2,500 of those are going to be interventional treatments or clinical trial options to manage a variety of cancer types, as you're all well aware. 39% of individuals in this room will get cancer in their lifetimes, just speaking about one disease and how relevant and concerning this is. So as a company, we took the first step in essentially building AI agents so that we can augment and build onto the teams at research sites. We can just allow them to do more, right? There are just significant challenges. I'm gonna throw a couple of quick personal stories in here because I think it resonates with me, especially at the moment here. So a close friend of mine about 2 months ago had a stroke. He's unfortunately like semi-disabled, which is frustrating. I'm trying to get him into a stroke clinical trial for recovery at Stanford. 14 calls and emails later, and I've worked with the neurology department in my last software company at Stroke. No one has even called me back yet, and I know the individual is there. After multiple escalations of communication on campus, I still haven't gotten a response, right? They're busy with other things. Getting patients into clinical trials is one of the first big steps. So our first product is Jane, right? Jane essentially gets implemented by a major academic center or research site. We then speak to every patient every month across 80 languages to inform them about the available clinical trials. And if a patient says, I'm interested in that stroke clinical trial, then we actually use an interactive chatbot to collect information from the patient. Patients can upload images around their current medications, lab results, information from a cardiologist that may be needed to screen into this stroke study, for example, and then we can help match that patient all seamlessly, right? And to give you some numbers real quick, early discussions with UCLA, we work with small sites and big sites even today. Like, yeah, we talk to all of our patients about clinical trials. I'm like, you have 875,000 patients using UCLA Health in Southern California. You're telling me that you talk to one of those patients at least once a year. Well, you need a call center with about 75 dedicated individuals calling patients every day to get to that number. And they don't. They have a team of 4, right? So there is a significant disconnect in what we need to do to get more patients into clinical trials. 87% of patients or adults in the US want to consider a clinical trial, right? Less than 9% are ever asked in their lifetime. It's a very small number. So, right, this first product we have, Jane, it's their intention to talk to every patient every month about their clinical trials. And our data is already extremely positive, right? Already have an impact of about 30% on increasing clinical trial enrollment, right? We can do better than that because we can have effective conversations. We can help those patients navigate the right clinical trials, and we can allow patients to provide information that that site will need to make an assessment if they qualify today or qualify tomorrow. Sometimes it takes us, right, 9 months, 10 months of conversation with the patient before they say, okay, I'm now ready for a clinical trial. The site would have not called that patient 9 times in a row to say they're interested now in November of 2025. They were not interested for a variety of reasons back in April. Their condition progressed, their medication stopped being efficacious. There's a reason, why they didn't want to consider that clinical trial back then. So our first agent, Jane, my goal with Jane is to speak to 100 million patients every single month. This quarter we'll speak to over 600,000 patients every single month and about 1 million patients in the first quarter, which is amazing. We are here to start unblocking the top of the issue, which is getting more patients into clinical trials, which is amazing. And then of course we're learning a lot about this process, not to go into too much depth here. But sites are really bad at recruiting patients for clinical trials is what we have learned in 2 years, right? Some patients want to engage after hours because they have a job and they're really not on their phone. They can't take phone calls. You want to talk about mental health patients, don't accept phone calls. They only want to talk to us via interactive text, which is how Jane communicates with all patients, for example, etc. And then of course asking the right screening questions has become a science to us as a company as well. We want to make sure we ask the right questions so we can make an assessment if patients eligible for 1 or 3 different studies at that institution, for example. But that's just Jane. That's our first AI product. She's live now. We're very excited. We're scaling Jane. We've learned a lot. We keep learning a lot about how do we optimize that enrollment process for sites and how do we become the gold standard for how patients and sites communicate to one another. But really, when I look at what we have accomplished in the first 2 years, our goal is to build a series of agents at a research site that would take a research site that's performing at a minimum level, which is exactly the majority of institutions, and raise the bar. That means we can talk to more patients. We can manage transportation with integration with Uber, which I did in my last software company, right? We take fees on top of that transportation. We can help the patient better understand the requirements of a given trial. Once they choose to participate, we can talk to that patient every single day to make sure they're doing okay, make sure we're collecting basic non-serious adverse event information. We can make sure they're taking their medication and their con medications. We can capture if they're taking vitamins, which may be now preclusionary for that study. So there's a series of products that we plan to deploy in the next few years as a company, which is great. In January, we will have 100 sites activated across the US, which is wonderful. Again, given that we speak 80 languages, moving into an international capacity when the appropriate time is there will be important to us as a company as well. And even today, right, about a 30% increase in enrollment, that's fantastic. But if we can double or triple enrollment at these research sites, and even our early data, we're generating about an extra $400,000 a year for a small research site in additional revenue. So it feels good to move the needle. We have some very large opportunities ahead of us as well. Some very big ones you may recognize are going to be things like Cedars-Sinai and contracting, DaVita, which is a very big opportunity at 3,100 centers across the US. They have a clinical trial department there. And then a large number of hospitals that we have in place as well. In Q4, we'll have over 600,000 patients using our technology every single month. And again, the learning process of how to better communicate with patients in a specific disease category, optimizing the timing of that communication, optimizing the questions, re-optimizing the rescreening questions is all a part of our product, which is fantastic. From a competitive advantage, what we do is a very technical juggling of the regulatory environment correctly, because the IRBs need to review the information that we present to the patients. We may bring one of the IRBs as one of our financial partners into the current company. We'll make that decision in Q1 or so. But essentially, we also have 2 provisional patents as well. One of the big ones is the ability for all the images that are uploaded in interactive text and using that to match a patient to the right clinical trial. There's a lot that happens with our AI product to get that accomplished, which is wonderful. We want to get those patents completed by Q2 next year. Pretty big market. There's about 110,000 research sites or research departments that we would sell to across the world today. I think there'll be an expansion of clinical trial opportunities if we can better virtually resource these sites as well. And today, all of our fees and revenues are generated from the research site in a recurring model. I'll pull that up in a moment here. But we will also work directly with the sponsor so that we can have better content going to the patient about that clinical trial, and then be able to generate monthly recurring revenue from the sponsors who are managing that study as well. So pretty big TAM. In the next 8 years, we think we'll get to about $143 million of year-end revenue or run rate, which is exciting for us as a company. Again, lots of software available in clinical trials. Given that I built my last company in that space, I can tell you that none of them are great. Why? Because coordinators, nurses, and principal investigators or sub-Is are not in front of the computer managing software. You now need to think differently, right? The world of creating more software isn't going to help a site. We're now reached the stage of how do we put 10 AI agents across their research site to fill all the really challenging, difficult, impossible to scale communication, management, compliance, and information review into their research site, right? So software is not working, it has not worked is what we have essentially found out in the last 20 years at sites. They're just overwhelmed, they're just not going to use more software. It's now part of deploying AI agents that actually replace some of the activities so that we can deliver value and it creates a work product on behalf of that research site. Today, again, our revenue comes from research sites. We want to build our research site base as quickly as possible. The more sites that we have, the better conversations we can have with sponsors next year to pay the premium model of our product. So our sites are paying between $700 to about $3,000 a month in recurring revenue, which is great. We actually send an invoice to them to get reimbursed by the sponsor. So this is designed to be cost neutral to them. We're a digital outreach and marketing solution that they should get reimbursed for. As we move into larger institutions like the UCLAs, right, the monthly recurring revenue will be much higher than kind of the initial tier today. And then starting in 2026, we'll start to collaborate with sponsors. They will then begin to pay for the higher value of our solution. My last software company in the clinical trial space was called Clin1, right? We've got a small revenue fee up front from the sites. We've got enough volume of sites to bring that voice to the sponsor. And then, sponsors are paying $1 million per clinical trial to use that software after 7 years of development work. So micro cap, right, we're very small in the micro. We're on the very left side of that scale here. This year we'll do under $1 million in revenue, but we'll start next year with about $1.2 million of ARR, which is great. We had a lot of expenditures prior to this, as you can imagine, to build the company. Next year we'll do about $3 million of revenue, at least be cash flow neutral, potentially positive. We'll see on the investments and how effective our commercial team is converting our clients, which is great. And then nice systematic growth thereafter into the business. The team, again, I spent 20 years in the clinical trial space, built a research network of 300 private oncology practices back about 20 years ago, well before research networks were a thing. We sold that off to a lab because of a couple of models that we developed that were unique. Hannah is one of the co-founders. She spent her career at DaVita and a couple of big sponsors, and was a bench scientist at the NIH as well. And then we do a lot of offshoring. So Anjani, who's our head of our technology, is in India, runs a fantastic team out there. We built this product from a very capital efficient perspective. One of my board members, Steve Goodbarn, is sitting over there as well, but we've got a great series of advisors and board members of the business, very savvy individuals. From product advisors, we keep adding on fantastic leadership from the research side, who've been in the clinical trial space for a long time. They've been there, done that, have treated 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 patients, understand the challenges and the nuances that we're here to manage as a company. I funded the company to date. This is our first outside equity raise in terms of a company. It's $1 million convertible note. We will allow up to a $1.3 million raise. We have 750,000 to be exact, funded and committed, or committed and funded, I should say, which is great. So only about 250 left, but we may go up to 1.3 million on this note, and then we'll do a traditional Series A in Q2 of 2026. The goal at this point, now that we have a live product, we've worked out a lot of the kinks, a lot of crazy hours have gone into Jane, really about scalability. We want to build out the commercial team to make sure we can support that. I don't have to get on a plane every single week, which I don't mind doing, by the way, but it's great to have a regional sales manager to manage accounts in each of the key regions as well. We expect to exit the business in about 5 or 6 years from now. Again, the company is about 2 years old, so we've had quite a bit of work done in the past to build a foundation of what we do. The typical market exits for our space, not counting AI, right? Just SaaS companies in the clinical trial space are exiting between 8 and 14 times run rate for revenue, which is pretty remarkable. We have not seen an AI clinical trial company exit in the space yet. It'll be interesting to see what happens. We think there's 3 acquirers, right? Advara, whose leadership I know quite well. They almost bought my last company. WCG, another big conglomerate acquiring companies. They may come into our next round for investment. And then Verily is a Google company that's starting to move into the clinical trial space. We'll see if they make any significant progress there. And as Dave has mentioned, 27 of our sites have become investors. We'll always allow our sites to become investors as part of our journey. We think they're important for us, not just as a client, but also individuals joining our product roadmap, new therapeutic specialties, which we learn about, and then become long-term partners for us as well. Any questions? Yes, sir.
How crowded is the space?
We are one of the first AI companies in this space to create AI agents, so it's not very crowded today. I assume we will see an acceleration of competing companies in the next several years.
So are these people that site investors, are they potential people that would buy in?
They're pretty small. I would say small is like $100 million, but Advara, for example, was just acquired by BlackRock for $8 billion. WCG is probably worth about $5 billion, so they have much deeper pockets to make acquisitions.
Good. Now I got a personal question.
Yes.
I'm involved in a clinical trial
Oh, fantastic.
at OHSU. I screened and got accepted. The day after I screened and got accepted, they shut it down.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so was I. They shut down the trial because of one patient out of 1,000, over 1,000 that they dosed,
The phase 3.
died.
Yeah.
And one out of over 1,000. Phenomenal results in this clinical trial. So my question is there something that your company can do to guide me to potentially other clinical trials that are ongoing in the specific medical issue that I have?
Yeah, of course. So, great question. The future answer is yes, but even with our current product, what Jane would tell you, what even if that study closed, what you're now eligible for going forward. And because you would use our product to screen, right, we store that information about your health profile, and as your condition changes with time, we know more about you because you've given that information to us. So we can better and better match you into future clinical trials.
So I don't want to disrupt the status that I have in my current trial. Because the status of the clinical trial is that it's just pause.
Yep.
It's not ended.
Yep.
So, but that pause could be, who knows?
It could be a little while, right?
Yeah.
You can potentially go on compassionate use to stay on the medication if it's helping you as well.
Pardon me?
You can go on
She
compassionate
hasn't
use.
started.
Oh, you haven't started yet? Oh, I thought you were taking the medication already. I
No, the
apologize.
medication's a one-time infusion, 4 hours.
Oh, wonderful.
And I was ready to be dosed.
Okay.
And then,
For perspective, that's a good point. So the way that this is going to work to start with is, so he goes to UCLA, and UCLA says, here's the 800,000 people who have walked through this front door for a broken bone or whatever, okay? If you were one of those people, when they reach out to you and they sign you and you agree to sign up, they're going to keep you in that database, and every time a clinical trial in UCLA comes up, they're going to contact you.
it applies to my condition?
Yes, they're going to contact you and say, hey, there's a clinical trial that's going on. That's the problem, is people. I mean, I don't know how you found the clinical trial you're
Oh, it's
looking at,
unbelievable.
but they don't. It doesn't work the way you would think. I mean, you would think your oncologist, if you're cancer clinical trial, would say, oh, here's a clinical. That doesn't happen because they don't know. If you're not your own advocate in the health industry today, you're good. That's not good.
Right.
So the problem is people don't know they exist because the medical community is not set up to really tell them that. I mean, your oncologist, not your oncologist, but a oncologist, they don't know. There's 4,000 of them. How would they even know that?
Right.
So this is to try to gather. They're trying to gather information. Now, this is one of those places where.
So how do you
You're
get
worried
on
about-
board with you? How do I get on board with you?
Yeah, well, we would sign a contract with your institution, which includes a PAA, which makes that
With
account very
OHSU?
sticky. Yep. And then we keep you apprised going forward of all of their
Is
clinical
that
trials.
possible that you could sign up with them?
We're working on it. The institutions are the bigger ships to turn, and like Rutgers
Yeah.
University is a client of ours. We're still implementing out.
So
for
until
7
you
months.
sign something with OHSU, nothing
In the future, we will, right? We will
Yeah.
allow you to use Gene in the public environment, which says, look, I live in Denver, here's my medical condition, here's my challenges around comorbidities, for example, and then we would find you that clinical trial as well. Once we get enough sites under our umbrella, we can then have a direct-to-consumer to help that process, because Gene is going to be the same tool that we've created, which is have a conversation with me, so I can at least find you the right clinical trial, because that conversation sometimes is very long. It's like 30 back and forth questions and answers, by the way. We have a deep conversation and allow you to provide us information that allows us to better manage that.
And I've gone through all that process.
Yeah, so you have to put this in perspective, okay? The reason why that geography is important, right? I mean, he wants to be able to do that in a place that's close to you, so you can go get the treatment. And remember, not all those clinical trials are clinical trials for people who have stage 4 cancer. I mean, a lot of those clinical trials might be for somebody that has, a skin disorder, something that's not as critical, where they're not like, yeah, I'll get on an airplane and fly to Houston if I have to take this oncology drug. I mean, there's all kinds of clinical trials that. So a lot of them, that geography, your proximity to that clinic is really important. Maybe not as important for somebody who's got stage 4 cancer, but so the geography, having a clinical trial in your area, that's why the low-hanging fruit. Initially, it's match people to clinical trials in places they are, places they've been. So that's
In my clinical trial, they pay for everything, no matter where I am.
It's wonderful care. You get phenomenal care during a clinical trial. The level of medical and safety oversight is remarkable. You should get all expenses paid for.
Everything.
98% of patients who participate in a clinical trial will do it again. It's very positive, right? I was at my dermatologist the other day, one of my potential accounts actually, and I'm like, you spend only like 6 minutes with me. You have never talked about a clinical trial with me. I'm like, yeah, my hair loss is, I'm maturing, unfortunately. I would participate in alopecia, in clinical trials. Never offered. I'm like, I know you have them here. Like, you sent me 7 text messages about my appointment and my visit and how to get here, but none about clinical trials. So that's the gap we're solving with Jane, and we can do it at remarkable scale, right? And with that, we can change the path of how patients get into clinical trials, because my story earlier reflected, sometimes it feels impossible as a patient to get into a clinical trial, right? And day one of Researchify Health, just give some transparency. My dad was diagnosed with ALS, lived in Southern California. I wanted to get him into UCI, UCLA. 3 months to get a hold of a single person at those 3 centers. It's really frustrating. That was day one of Researchify. This communication gap has to be solved. Anyway. Fantastic. Yes, sir.
That goes along with my question. You started your presentation saying you made 19 calls to Stanford.
Yeah.
Does your solution offer any solution to that issue? Because that to me would be more than the top of the funnel. That would be okay, let's move forward and build the funnel. So does your solution do that?
Yes. So anytime we get a couple ways. When a research site has a lead externally like myself, I should have been added to the monthly communication. That's number one. Number two, we integrate with their website so patients can sign up to start receiving the communication from Jane directly, which requires no lift, which still allows you to navigate their clinical trials remotely as well. And then in the future, we'll have a Jane for each research site as a pop-up on their clinical trial page for their website as well.
How does it affect that 19 calls you've made and still haven't gotten through?
Well, it makes me want to work harder and get Stanford as an account.
But I mean, great.
Yeah, of course.
Your solution, does it start at the top there?
It would, right? It would allow me to understand what clinical trials are inside that institution. It's a little bit more complex at Stanford because they're part of something called StrokeNet, which is a national group of clinical trial sites. So when we would implement that solution, we can have a conversation with the patient about what's available at Stanford and what's available at UCLA under that StrokeNet umbrella, right? Because they're all working together as a collaboration. But
One more?
I would bypass the need to call them because I could simply sign up to start talking to Jane directly.
That's what I'm asking, is how does that affect the actual access at the level at which you are trying to get to them?
I could just get all the answers I need immediately without the need to actually talk to a person in 80 languages.
One more? One
Yes, sir.
more.
For clarification, were you saying that Jane is on track to have 100 million conversations a month, or to speak to 100 million people?
My goal with Jane in the next 8 years is to start speaking to 100 million patients a month about clinical trials. In January, we'll be at about 1 million, so I'm like 1% of the way there. Obviously, as we scale and accelerate our business, we can sign up larger accounts. But the majority of the U.S. is left in the dark about clinical trials. And yet, here we are as pharmaceutical companies developing amazing next-generation medicines, and there's this remarkable communication gap that we can fill with just Jane.
I'm curious, like how big are you all anticipating the human population to be in 8 years to be able to speak to 100 million people a month?
Well, in the U.S., there's 250, 60 million adults, probably a little more than that. Everyone's a patient. Right? You could be interested in Botox. You could be interested in removing, skin condition, or you have eczema, or you just want to know for your parents or a caregiver, right? You're involved in that family process. You want to be aware of what clinical trials exist for a loved one or one of your children. So everyone in the world is a patient. Right? You're seeing medical care for a variety of reasons. It could be something simple, weight loss. It could be something that's observational. We're all patients here, right? We just are very disconnected to getting that
It just
clinical
seems
trial.
like a huge marketing push to be able to introduce that idea to the end consumer.
Yes, but the way we get the patients readily is under the contract of an institution. We get a VAA and we import all of their patients, right? So they're the ones who are essentially paying for our patient acquisition, not us. Yeah.
Okay, you're gonna be around, right?
Yes, thank you so much again.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Great.
appreciate it.
I took a little one line. I was gonna go on one of my political rants, but I won't, so. I'm gonna tell you that Obamacare, whatever, we need more health care, and that's gonna help solve it, I think. So,